So, all eyes are on Venezuela. Following a U.S. intervention, Nicolas Maduro is out. And of course, everyone is wondering what this means for the global economy. Well, a new analysis from Wells Fargo Economics has some pretty surprising things to say about it. Let's break it all down.
You know, when something this big happens, you've got to ask, what now? What are the ripple effects going to be for the markets, for global politics, for all of us?
You've seen the headlines, right? They're dramatic. Maduro is out, and your first thought is probably chaos. You'd expect an event like this to send massive shockwaves through the financial world, especially oil markets. But what if the real story is something completely different?
All right, let's dive into the first big takeaway from this report, which is all about financial stability. And honestly, it's a bit of a shocker. It seems like the market already knew this was going to happen. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? You have a major oil-producing nation in complete turmoil. That has to mean a crash in oil prices and total chaos for global markets, right? Well, the analysis gives us a surprisingly straightforward answer. Nope. The report argues that a big, long-lasting disruption is actually pretty unlikely. But, wait, how is that even possible? So you're probably wondering, what's the proof? How do we know the markets weren't completely blindsided? Well, check out this chart. Over the past year, Venezuelan bonds, which, by the way, are technically in default, have absolutely skyrocketed. I mean, we're talking a 90% jump for one and a mind-blowing 104% for another. That doesn't look like panic. That looks like investors betting that this exact scenario was going to play out.
Yeah, and this quote from the report just nails it. The huge leap in bond prices tells you everything. Investors weren't caught flat-footed. In fact, as the U.S. increased its military presence in the area, the market's confidence just grew and grew. So by the time it actually happened, it was anything but a surprise.
Okay, but this whole thing is way bigger than just the stock market. Actually, the report says the most fascinating part of this story is what it means for global politics. This is where things get really interesting on a world scale.
So here's the idea. What happened in Venezuela is basically pouring fuel on a fire that was already burning. It's speeding up the fracturing of the global economy into two very distinct camps. You've got the U.S.-aligned bloc on one side, which makes up about 70% of the world's economy. And on the other, you've got the China-aligned bloc, with the other 30%.
And now this intervention is making countries draw a line in the sand. They kind of have to choose a team. The report is keeping a close eye on a few key players here. Colombia and Brazil, for instance. They condemned the U.S. action, which could push them closer to China's corner. But then you have Chile, with a new president who's supportive, and that could pull them even tighter into the U.S. camp.
And look, this isn't just some abstract political chess game. When the world splits apart like this, it has real-world consequences for everyone's wallet. The report is crystal clear. It doesn't matter how the dominoes fall. The end result is the same: slower growth for the entire global economy.
Okay, so we've looked at the global picture. Now let's zoom in a little closer, from the world stage to what's happening in the neighborhood. How is this U.S. action really affecting the political trends right there in Latin America?
For the past year and a half or so, we've been seeing this really clear political shift across Latin America, a move to more right-leaning conservative governments. You can see it mapped out right here. The big argument in the report is that what's happening in Venezuela, as dramatic as it is, probably won't be enough to stop this bigger regional wave.
So why won't it derail the whole trend? Well, it's because everyone pretty much agrees Venezuela is different. It's seen as a total outlier because of its unique politics, its strong ties to China, and of course, its massive oil reserves. So the report says the conservative wave will keep going, unless, and this is the big but in the report, the real danger, the thing that could change everything, is if the U.S. tried to do the same thing in places like Cuba or Nicaragua. That would be a game changer.
All right, let's take a step back. We've talked about the financial markets, global geopolitics, and the regional view. So what are the main things we really need to understand here? What's the big picture?
So what's the bottom line? It really comes down to three key things. First, no panic in the markets. They were ready for this. Second, this whole event is pushing the world faster and further into those two competing U.S. and China blocs. And third, that conservative political trend in Latin America, it's probably going to continue because everyone sees Venezuela as a complete one-off.
And that really leaves us with one huge lingering question. What happened in Venezuela has definitely exposed, and even deepened, the cracks in our global order. It just makes you wonder, as the world keeps splitting apart, where's the next fault line going to appear?